Good evening. Tonight we're going to go back to the questionnaires you guys filled out at the beginning of the year. We were discussing sin before all this lockdown happened, and I don't feel like that discussion has actually finished, but I think it's a discussion we need to have when we're all back together. So I had another look at your questionnaires, and the one thing that popped out to me and caught my eye was this question. Tell us everything you know or think you know about Jesus. Now, by and large, you guys didn't seem to have much of a clue. Of the 10 questionnaires that came back, 4 had a really good understanding. The other 6 could all be summed up by this, which is actually a huge issue.
There we are.
Thanks, Dad. That's awesome. Cheers.
That's it.
Yep. Thanks. Sorry, that's my father. Just taking a video, Dad.
What's that?
For Sunday. Shared.
Right.
Hi, Granddad.
I'll leave you to it then.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
These are the perils of doing videos in home. Anyway, so most of them could be summed up with this, which is a great big question mark, which is actually a huge issue. Because if Nikki and I are talking about Jesus and you guys have no idea who we're talking about, we're basically just flapping our gums. So let's start today with Jesus 101, his biography. So Jesus was born somewhere between 2 BC and 2 AD, depending on which scholars you listen to, in the town of Bethlehem, which sits somewhere to the west of the Dead Sea. He was born in Bethlehem because this was where his earthly father Joseph was from, and the Roman government was requiring every adult male in Israel to go to their hometown and sign a census. This trip home wasn't fun for Joseph's wife Mary, who was 9 months pregnant at the time. That's a distance of 11 kilometres, which is here to Dobson, as the crow flies, or 18.6 kilometres along the road, which is almost to Nahiri from here, which is not a long distance in a car, but remember they just had a donkey and their feet, and walking would have taken around 4 to 6 hours. Can't say it's something I'd have wanted to do, not at 9 months pregnant. Now, most of us know where we were born, and possibly we know the names of our grandparents and our great-grandparents. Some of us might even be lucky enough to know great-great-great-great-grandparents. I can only remember, or know really, my great-grandparents. But Jesus can trace his lineage on both sides of his family all the way back to the beginning. When it comes to knowing his whakapapa, Jesus rocks. I'm not going to list them all for you because there's a lot of names and some of them are pretty hard to pronounce. But if you're into that kind of thing, you should check out Matthew chapter 1 verses 1 to 17 for Joseph's line, or Luke chapter 3 verses 23 to 38 for Mary's line. So Jesus and his mum and dad stayed in Bethlehem for around 2 years after Jesus was born, and then some wise dudes with camels turned up with some flash gifts. That would have been fabulous if they hadn't stopped off to see Herod, who was the ruler of Israel at the time, before they came to see Jesus. Herod got kind of upset by the idea that these guys had come to honour a new king, and decided that he would try and get rid of him. And seeing as he didn't know exactly where this new king was, he decided just to kill every boy under the age of 2 years old from the Israelite camp. And so Joseph has this heavenly messenger come and visit him in his dreams and tell him to get up and take the kid and take the missus and head off to Egypt, which thankfully he does. And so off they go. They immigrate to Egypt, and they stay there for around about 2 years or so till they hear that Herod is dead, when they return to Israel and go and settle in Nazareth, which is where Joseph was from. That is southwest of the Sea of Galilee. Now, we don't hear much about Jesus or the family during the next 20 odd years. There's one incident when he's 12, when the family visits Jerusalem for Passover. After the festival, the family head home. 2 days down the road, Joseph and Mary realise Jesus isn't actually with them. So they head back to Jerusalem and find him in the temple, teaching all the leaders. This is at 12 years of age. They decide he's too young for that kind of carry-on, and they take him back home to Nazareth, where the Bible tells us he grew in stature, which means his height, and in wisdom. Now, it's not until Jesus is 30 that we really start to see him move. He is first baptized by his cousin John. Yes, John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin, in the Jordan River. They have a brief joint ministry, and then Jesus begins his mission on earth in full. His base of operations is Capernaum, which is a town at the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee, most likely stayed at Peter's house. During the next 3.5 years of his life, Jesus will perform countless miracles, healing thousands, feeding tens of thousands with fish and bread, walk on water, calm storms, teach and teach some more, upset the establishment, and basically turn the world upside down. He will then die on one of the cruelest devices of death known to man, the cross, thereby completing God's plan of redemption for humanity. How that works, I will explain a little more next week. This week, I just wanted to give you an overview of his life. Couple of points to remember. One, Jesus' dad, Joseph, died before Jesus began his ministry, making Jesus the head of that household, which included, and brings me to my second point, brothers and sisters. Yes, Jesus had brothers and sisters. It's believed by some that the books of both James and Jude were written by two of his brothers. I look at Jesus' life and wonder how I can relate to it. It was such a different era, but in one respect, Jesus' life and mine do in fact relate. I too was taken from my homeland as an infant and taken to another land. I was born in Scotland. My family immigrated to New Zealand when I was around 18 months old, about the same age as Jesus. And I found it's an interesting thing to live in a land that's not really your own. Sometimes I feel like a Kiwi, and sometimes it clearly comes across to me that I am not. I have a foot in either camp, and it's sometimes difficult to know who to back when the All Blacks play Scotland at rugby. My family moved a lot when I was a kid. Town to town, house to house, suburb to suburb. The longest we ever spent in one dwelling was 4 years. The problem with all that shifting is friends. Or the lack of friends, really. Always having to make new friends. Never knowing how long you would have them, which eventually made me think it wasn't worth trying. I always wanted a friend who had been my friend all my life, who could know me inside and out without having to be told. As a child, I never had that, or at least I thought I never had it. After becoming a Christian, I realised there was a friend who had always been there. God had always been in my corner. He had seen it all. Every minute of my life had been shown to him, and he knew me inside and out. He saw my failures, he saw my successes, he loved me anyway. Jesus didn't just come to perform miracles. He came to restore relationship between you and God. So if you're feeling lonely, isolated in your bubble, know that God is with you, right where you're at. He knows you inside and out, has seen your successes and your failures, and loves you anyway. If we'd been at the shed, I would have played you one of my favourite songs to finish. Hopefully, Nikki has added a link to the song I would have played you, and you can listen to it if you like. Otherwise, I wish you well in your week. God bless.